Hey guys. I'm starting the webinar right now, and yeah, we're kicking things in. All right, so I guess we've already started. Let's see if someone is already joining. Awesome. We have 5 now, 8, 10 attendees. That's great. That means everything is working, and people can join, and we're live. So a very brief introduction to everyone joining. My name is Mikita. I'm a marketing manager at Legal Nodes. And we're really happy to see you guys here on this event about biggest mistakes that projects usually make on the pre-TGE stage. So we'll wait a little until more attendees join. I'll do a very brief overview about what are we planning and going to cover on during this event. And in around a few minutes, we'll actually start with our speaker's presentation and the actual webinar content. Brief ask for all the participants. If you have any problems with hearing us or seeing the video, let us know in the chat. I guess if nobody is saying that there are some problems, everything goes well. But yeah, let us know if there are any problems. And I'll also run right now a very quick poll that you can answer right now for the poll feature. We want to know more about the audience that has joined us today, like what is your role, whether you're planning to do any token launches in 2025 in order to better understand you, your motivations, and maybe tailor the content on the go. Okay, we got a message that chat is disabled. Let us know if this is the same for all the attendees, whether you have the chat feature, and I'll double check this. Awesome, we have some poll data coming in. Okay, we know that chat doesn't work. We'll try to sort it out, but we know that poll works, which is cool. And we have some data there, so we'll try to fix the chat in the coming minutes. And let me tell you a bit more about the agenda. So we have roughly 1 hour, and that will be split in half. So the first half we'll talk about tokenomics and biggest mistakes in designing tokenomics. And then the second half of our event will be dedicated to legal compliance and like mistakes and mitigation strategies to avoid such scenarios. And every talk will be around 15 minutes, maybe a bit more, a bit less. So we have some questions that have been sent to us before by you. So after the presentation, we'll start by addressing those questions. And you are also very welcome to submit your own questions using the Q&A feature that is working, fortunately. And also you'll be also able to upvote the questions that you want to be answered first. So we'll roughly have like 15-20 minutes for presentation and then Q&A with each speaker. And we'll hopefully end as planned, but maybe we'll run a bit longer, which is fine, I think. So I think this is like the main information to kick this off. I'll be now slowly transitioning it to our speakers. So our first speaker is Vincent de Vos, founder of Chainforce. And I'll pass it to him to do a brief intro and present to you about the tokenomics part of our event. Vincent, over to you.
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Mikita. It's nice to see so many people gathered here online with us. So I'm the founder of Chainforce. We're a tokenomics consultancy firm, tokenization consultancy firm based out of the Netherlands. And uh, when I found Chainforce 4 years ago, I was very impressed by the use case of the Ethereum blockchain and having a decentralized store for value administration and the opportunity that that brings. And we're very interested that much that I decided to make a new business model that would be harnessing tokenization and use of a token in its core. And that was the journey that led me through understanding and looking at tokenomics for the first time from business perspective. And during the journey, while I was fundraising, I realized I was much more interested in the opportunities of using tokenization and token models for business innovation than I actually was in pursuing that actual business itself. So 4 years later, with a team of 5 experts, we've been helping over 100 clients, and our clients have established over 350 million in market cap and liquidity. And we've helped them establish that. So we have clients across the spaces of DeFi, Web3, GameFi, DeepIn, decentralized AI, and we help them build, launch, and operate their business with confidence. And the way we do that is that we are like an objective third party, a fiduciary that can really help to bring these insights into their business, providing transparency and helping quantifying at every step of their tokenized journey. And when I prepared this presentation, I thought let's share some thoughts after working in the space for like 6 years hands-on, 4 years with Chainforce, and learn more about and basically share you a bit more about the thoughts that I have about the space, about tokenization in general, and how it can help. So I believe tokenization really has a big opportunity to unlock new business models and economic innovation, and that business can benefit from it long term. But it still remains a business. So it means a business's capability to really generate revenue will be the biggest determining factor for long-term success. Now, having that said, I think a bad business model could actually benefit short-term from tokenization because they can differentiate themselves and introduce incentives that are not possible in a traditional way. At the same time, I think a good business can actually even establish a stronger proposition and amplify their growth with a tailored model. And because I'm going to talk about token models and tokenization or tokenomics, I want to have said that you should tailor your token model to the objectives and the constraints of your business. And copy pasting one without any validation is simply stupid and risky at this point. And that even a good business can be jeopardized by a bad business, by a bad token model, and not just the business, but also its reputation. And in the end, if you have a full design and you don't validate and stress test it, you're still risking everything because you don't understand it fully. So yeah, before we go into depth, make sure that you understand what you're doing. If not, work with professionals, but keep your horizon on building something long-term and don't think short-term only. And what I'm going to tell you, it's not investment advice, not financial advice. So please do your own research as well. So first of all, I'm going to talk about crypto economic models and mistakes that I see founders make pre-TGE. And this is where it's located in the kind of tokenization pyramid. If we look at the terminology, I like to use tokenomics because it's an abbreviation. But we can also talk about token economics. We can call it crypto economics. What it comes down to is that it's a generalization of a couple of different aspects around token utility design. What's the role of your business? What's the purpose of the token in it? And what function does it fulfill? It's specifically supply design, talking about the allocations, vesting schedules, unlocks, anything around supply, but also about incentive strategy design. So how can you use that token to really innovate and to offer something new that you could not do with a traditional business? Same goes for governance. You can now have a system governed with a token, which was harder to do in a global or distributed fashion than it is today. So I'm going to stick to the term tokenomics, but know that it means a lot more than just that term typically. And I will double click on any specifics if that is needed. So it was, when preparing this presentation, I thought about what are now 5 important considerations I'd like you to make you aware of and provide as a value to you when you join this webinar. And I put them in the form of a pyramid, starting with token design. So I think mistake number 1 is that you only consider a single layered utility instead of a multi-layered utility design. So utility is also kind of a buzzword, but it basically means what functionality does your token offer? And what I see is that when you just offer one functionality, and sometimes that's even as a means of payment, which is not the strongest use case with stablecoins these days. What you're getting is lack in demand, weaker network effects, and you make your token very prone to speculations, basically. And the solution to it is to look at your token from a more holistic perspective and try to understand if it can have multiple uses within the same ecosystem, so that you can have a more diverse demand driver for your token and actually be able to establish stronger network effects and thereby becoming more sustainable long-term in value creation. And I think there's 3 layers where you can reflect on, or where you could consider utility for your token. And I'm going to mention a couple of examples in this slide and briefly skim over them. But it comes down to solution access, ways of value capture, because that solution access is very understandable for everybody. You use the token to get access to features, you get a discount, you gain from it directly in the context of that specific business. But because the token is also integrated into the DeFi landscape, you can also now have different ways of value capture where you can have tokens entitled to holders a share of any revenue or economic benefits, which is, I think, an incredible innovation that I'm constantly talking about when I talk about tokenization. And there's many examples where this is happening, where protocols on-chain are redistributing their fees to early adopters, users of the platform. And it's an incredible, valuable utility. But even outside that, you have the possibility for ecosystem integrations, where your own token could actually be used across protocols within a broader ecosystem, such as Aave's GHO stablecoin, for example, which is now used to actually back other assets. And I think I've even seen it used in Morpho, yield pools these days. This is all driving demand for your token, basically. And by implementing this from the start, you make sure the demand for your token is not just on one, but it's actually multiple. Let's go to strategic consideration number 2, the fair launch principles. I think a mistake is neglecting what a fair launch principle is about and how you could employ it in your token launch. So the summary is that a fair token launch makes sure that there's for everybody equal access to obtaining the token and making sure that there's no significant insider allocations, which makes it easier to trust and provide transparency. And you have different ways you can adopt these fair launch principles by making sure you have transparent tokenomics, not just publishing the information, but also really making sure that you provide access to your commitments and to your smart contracts and maybe to your dashboard to show that what has been committed to is actually being executed and it's being put on chain. The second is looking at optimizing also your vesting and unlocks, because fair launch principles make it easier to prevent disproportionate allocations and make sure that you have multiple stakeholders aligned with the long term of your business, instead of having an investor that simply is looking for a liquidity event. You can also make sure to provide equal access. So not doing that insider allocation, but using a method like an IDO, which is a fair launch, like a fair launch method, where different people can buy your token for different price, and make sure that it distributes more evenly and not gets into the wallet of one of your bigger investors. And the last aspect is more a community-centric approach, where you actually engage your community during the launch and after the launch. If you ask me, the fair launch mainly helps to avoid any challenging liquidity issues, because there is no high allocation of tokens with specific stakeholders, but it is a collective, community-oriented distribution. So, mistake number 3. I think it's not considering enough the impact that unlocks have at your TGE. So there's been some data and research done, and I've generalized them into these slides. This is not a one-size-fits-all, but we can see trends where low unlocks, even though they show strong price stability, do seem to favor investor tokens over retail participants at that stage. While if you look at more like a moderate or a higher unlock, there seems to be a nice balance between providing sufficient liquidity for trading activity while also minimizing that volatility. And if we look at the data that I have here, you can see that there are different ROIs and ROI retention and different price impacts for different unlock percentages. And I see that they seem to be organized or categorized around specific use cases. So we see, for example, for infrastructure and tooling, we see different trends than we see for DeFi and DePIN protocols. Whereas, of course, the meme coins are much more known for their kind of IDO high unlocks. But yeah, let's not make a meme coin a good example of an actual token model, to be honest. But you can see that the high unlocks really fit with more speculative projects, more meme coin tokens that are used there. Now we come to 2 aspects of considerations at TGE that I could talk about all day, and which I think are most undervalued today. So I see a lot of founders that have a model, they have a design of a token, and they've actually spent time to understand how their token operates in the context of their business model, and also how that relationship is like having an impact back and forth to both sides. Only to then start looking at establishing a price which has not been estimated or has not been quantified in the context of their actual business. So I think it's a big mistake not to have a data-driven, quantifiable approach to estimating your initial token price, because it is highly determined, not just for your initial market cap and your fully diluted valuation, but it really sets the stage and it really dictates the kind of economical value that your business needs to sustain to grow the price of the token over time. So it explicitly is putting a economic requirement on your future token price ambitions, basically. And I'm not saying we have to constantly optimize for token price growth, but it's good to understand that going to a next price level in a year will require generation of specific amounts of revenue. And these will very much be dictated by that initial price if you want to maintain it at that price. I mean, we all know these token launches that start high, go low, and then have their so-called price discovery, which is not price discovery, it's just neglecting it, only to then slowly start crawling up. And a fair token valuation can help you make sure that you're not one order of magnitude off from the start. So you can take your business model, you can use your metrics from your business model, and use that to map towards your token price estimations. And there's methods for this. So instead of having an investor that says, well, it would be good if the token would be sold at this price in the public, because then we have a nice liquidity event and then we can get out. While you as a builder, you're still building the business for the upcoming years, and you now have set a price for yourself that you need to attain. If you have not estimated or evaluated that price in the context of your revenue model, of your business model, you're basically like shooting in the dark. And I think it's not about like it's not predicting the future. It's much more about not being one order of magnitude off, so that you're either not underselling, but also not overselling yourself and your token. And there's methods for this, there's experts for this that can help you with that. And I hope that you will avoid these kind of mistakes in the near future this year, so that we can see more tokens having a nice steady growth from the start, instead of the atypical falling off the cliff, only to see where we will ever end up going. The other topic that I'm quite excited about, because I'm not even sure if people in this call are aware that this is possible. It's the mistake of not getting your most crucial questions answered. And these are questions that I come across every day, and we help our clients find answers to them. But going to market without answering these questions, again, is like shooting in the dark. So you want to understand if your token economy is sustainable long term. You want to understand what happens if adoption, user growth is slower than expected, or if the transactions performed on average are much lower than you anticipated. Like, how will that affect your fee generation? And how will that affect maybe any token buybacks, like your value mechanics of your token? are you not highly overestimating your token demand? Don't you have too high of an inflation in the token due to your vesting schedules, but your revenue model, your business model is not able to sustain it? All these things, all these are very crucial questions if you go to market, or if you're gonna like put liquidity in the market. And there is ways that you can validate and stress test your token with so-called simulations. And the only thing I want you to take away from this slide is that your token economy is a complex adaptive system. And that is a system that can be modeled up to a certain extension, up to a certain point. And what we're looking at here in this picture is an image of a very simple business model with user activity and user growth interacting with a token model, which has allocations, investings, and unlocks. And in the middle, how we have modeled the KPIs for this business with a automated market making component. And in every place we have implemented behavior or scenarios in bandwidth, we can plug in our kind of measuring tool and start mapping, like start to analyze and understand what's happening. And with this information, with this setup, you're actually able to answer all these crucial questions before you even have like your liquidity out in the market, only to discover that you are not able to maintain it. And I would highly recommend using these methods to actually answer those questions. So I think that were my 19 minutes. Thanks for your patience, everyone. Thanks for joining. And curious towards your questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Vincent. I think it was really, really insightful for everyone who is planning to launch a token this year. You still have enough time to ask these questions highlighted by Vincent, and not to make these mistakes, or at least avoid making the biggest ones. So feel free right now to think about your questions and submit them. So according to the poll, we have at least 24 people who are planning to launch a token in 2025. This is your chance to ask your most pressing questions live. And while you think about these, we have a few questions that our participants have submitted beforehand about tokenomics. So I'll start with the first one, and I think you already kind of answered this, Vincent. So the question is, do you think we can say that tokenomics model is Web3 equivalent of business model?
Yes and no. You can completely tokenize your revenue streams and your value streams these days. So I would consider a DAO, for example, that has everything on chain. I would call that a business model run with a token. If we look at the more nuanced business cases where there's actually some off-chain value generation and it's an existing business that has a more traditional entity, it is much more about establishing a strong relationship between those business model revenues and the token model. And then I think that's then I cannot answer that with a yes, that question.
Awesome, thanks. The next question we had, so it's a quite general one. So the guest wanted to know more about how compliance comes into tokenomics, especially in the DeFi space, which is still largely decentralized. So any ideas around that?
Sorry, what was the question? I didn't fully understand it.
The question is specifically, if I rephrase, what are the tokenomics considerations specific for DeFi, decentralized finance?
Yeah, so we've been doing some research over the past 3 years and also published about it. We can see so-called trends, and we do benchmarking for projects where we see many different decisions around design and utility, but also these on-chain activities becomes much more interesting, but also more dynamic to take those into account into your tokenomics model.
Awesome. Hope that helps that attendee who asked this question. The next one we have, I also think you kind of went through this at the end of the talk. So it's a general one, how to validate tokenomics.
So yeah, that's a good first question. The question is, what are we specifically validating? So what aspects of that model? It could also be validating business outcomes, because if when we go through a business token design process with a client, the objectives, their expectations, and any kind of active constraints on the business, they form our requirements. And then we start to look at how the token design can support achieving those objectives. And we could very much measure specific tokenomics outcomes here and validate that things hold true, allocations are sufficient. If we offer a specific kind of yield farming or reward curve, could we sustain that for a year or 5 years? That can all be validated with simulations. What's more interesting is to see if you have an off-chain component and you have revenue generation, would your buybacks be sufficient over time, considering also inflation happening in the token, incentives being distributed, airdrops being made? And my answer would be yes, you can validate it up to a much higher degree than trying to do one-dimensional forecasting in spreadsheets.
Awesome. I think that brings a bit more insight into like the whole validation process. So we're switching right now to questions asked live. So the first one was from Nathan. How can you properly plan for tokenomics when you don't know if your TGE will raise 100K or 10 million?
Well, you still have a business plan or a business ambition. And the projects we typically work with, they don't have that. They don't expect to raise 10 million unless they have a plan and sufficient background to achieve that kind of raise. So what I do see happening is that based on the maturity and also the situation of a project, does your founding team have experience in crypto? Are you pre-product, or do you actually have revenue generation? You're going to start to fall into fundraising categories. So I think anybody there's a category that can raise at a max 100, 200K. I would never start to design a token model for them if I would assess it, assuming they could also be raising like 100 million. That doesn't make a lot of sense. But there are definitely categories that we put our clients into based on our assessment and what we have seen working with 100 clients, and give them a realistic expectation of their fundraising capability, which is 100% going back into our proposal and tokenomics model.
Yeah, that makes sense. Nathan, if you have any follow-up questions after that, feel free to follow up. Maybe you can provide some specifics about your project. The next question we have, it's more like a statement and double checking. So it's not sensible to have two tokens of a project, say A and B, and allow token A to be staked to obtain token B, and at the same time to allow token B to be staked to obtain token A, right?
That feels a bit like a zero-sum game where probably somebody's trying to play and trick people into reducing the circulating supply without having insights into this specific use case, at least.
Awesome. Again, Jake, if you have any other like ideas to provide following up, feel free to do so. We have a question that is more related to legal side, so we'll answer that after Nestor's talk. Next one, best practices or notable do's and don'ts in integrating points campaigns into one's tokenomics.
I like that question, and I've actually written a post or an article about this as well, is that especially if you're maybe pre-revenue or even pre-product, a token model still needs to work with assumptions. And if you don't have any data or any market research, it is shooting in the dark making a token model without having data from your users. And in that situation, in that case, I would actually propose to start with a point system so that you have data and can start measuring how it is being used. So you generate data about usage, you generate data about frequency and how much and like everything. And with that data, you can actually start to tailor a specific token model where you actually have those on-chain commitments, and it's not something you can come back from. So I would actually encourage that, and think it's a very good step to first generate the data before you're going to do a lot of on-chain commitments.
Great, thanks. And I think the last one we have, just because we have some time constraints, the last question from Mike. Is there a metric system calculation you currently use to help determine valuation of a token? And context, our business model is real estate equity raise.
Yeah, that's a good, that's an interesting question as well. So in my team, I work with an econometrist that also has a background in financial planning and analysis. And I think the first distinction to make is, does the token have any kind of traditional accounting, as in, is it being backed by anything? Is it asset backed? Because that would be a part of value that would already need to be taken into account when establishing a base price. The method that we use tries to bridge the gap between having a token model which has inflation and minting and the total supply and the circulating supply develop over time. And at the same time, you have on the demand side, a revenue generating business model. So we then we have a method called QTM, using the quantitative theory of money to establish an economical relationship between those two, which assigns basically an economical value to the token. And how you can see that is over a long period of time, your token price is going to, without any speculation, so in a vacuum, only your business model generating value, not without exchanges, not without any market sentiment. In a vacuum, your business model's total revenue generating capabilities could be divided by the total supply of the token in a sense. And if you use that high level and you plot that over time with revenue and your tokenomics, you're going to get a bandwidth in which your token price can be moving.
Awesome. Mike, I hope that answers the question. Yeah, again, because of time constraints, I think we're done for now with questions about tokenomics. Again, Vincent, thank you so much for your answers and your talk. Right now, you can see on screen the ways to get in touch. You can scan the QR code and see other resources. We'll also send the slides afterwards so that you can check these resources after the talk. And now we'll be transitioning to a second part of our discussion today, which is more focused on legal considerations of token launch. So let's say you've prepared your tokenomics, you're preparing your launch, and now you need to know how to make sure you don't get fined, right? Or don't get into like the policy and regulations cover of Coinbase, or sorry, not Coinbase, CoinDesk, covering some latest legal cases. So for that, I invite Nestor, co-founder of Legal Nodes, to dive deeper into this topic. Nestor, over to you.
Thanks a lot, Mikita. Thanks, Vincent. Have very interesting part about the tokenomics. I'll start sharing my screen now. So yeah, here's the presentation. First of all, it's great to see builders today. My name is Nestor. I'm a co-founder of Legal Nodes. We provide the legal platform that helps builders to simply plug in into different countries and solve their legal tasks there at the fraction of the cost. And over the past 3 years, we work with more than 300 builders, helping them with multiple tasks, starting from company registration, token legal opinions, VASP licenses, and other works. And from other side, we work with the network of local specialized partners from over 20 countries who have this expertise in both legal and the Web3 industry, and who also provided us with a lot of insights about their local regulations, different approaches in terms of how to qualify different crypto activities, etc. Some of these insights I'll be happy to share today. So let's start. And before we start, this is not a legal advice. It's important to share this disclaimer as we will be speaking about some regulatory and legal matters today. Our agenda will include 4 key questions or 4 key mistakes that I would like to share today. We will start with the token allocations and the mistakes that might be made in relation to it. Then we will proceed to the speculative use cases and the communications that might be done in relation to it and what might be the legal consequences. The mistake number 3 will include the details about the direct solicitation activities. That's especially relevant when it comes to the fundraising activities and the investors outreach. And the final mistake will be about the financial and sanction compliance. We will speak about some case studies, some risks, and the risk mitigation measures as well. All right, so let's start with the first, with the mistake number 1. And this mistake is related to the allocation structure of the project. In the end of the day, when it comes to the decentralized projects, the goal is to ensure that the project is run and controlled by the decentralized community, by the DAO. That's where the most of the projects with the high state of decentralization manage to operate in a compliant way when it comes to the regulations. And it usually starts with the token allocations, which can be divided into 2 categories. Category number 1 includes allocations for the team members, core contributors, investors, advisors, and some other early participants of the project who sometimes are called insiders. The category number 2 includes the broader ecosystem, DAO members, different supporters of the project, general contributors, some builders who use the technology and need tokens to build on top of this technology. And when it comes to the token allocations, which are unbalanced, where the majority of the tokens or where the main part of the tokens are controlled by the insiders rather than broader ecosystem, that's the case that usually leads to the risk where the tokens can be qualified as the security, because this key part of the tokens is controlled by the insiders. And therefore, the rest of the token holders might rely on the efforts of these insiders when it comes to the token price, which will lead to their expectations that the token should grow in price or their value should change based on the efforts of the insiders who control the majority of the tokens. One of the case studies was related to the Tron network. It was 1.5 years ago. And was related to the case where Tron controlled the big part of the tokens, which put this ecosystem in the position where there is one centralized stakeholder who controls the big part of the tokens, and as a result, who was in the position that allows this market player to manipulate with the token price, to do some activities that might result in some market manipulations. And that was something that was highlighted by the US regulators in the case against Tron. And that's the example how this unbalanced token allocations might lead to the regulatory risks for the project. Therefore, when it comes to the risk mitigation measures, and that's something that Vincent mentioned in his presentation a couple of minutes ago, it's important to ensure that these token pools in the allocation structure are balanced. And there is even a more important part that is related to the vesting and lockups that should be implemented for the token pools that are included into the insiders allocations, to make sure that the insiders or the core members of the project, founders, core contributors, advisors, investors, etc., they can't use or leverage their tokens to somehow harm the market by doing some manipulations with the token price. So that was the first risk that is related to the unbalanced token allocations. Let's proceed to the second one. The second mistake that I would like to share is related to the communication activities. Many Web3 projects are backed by the communities. Therefore, it's very important to have powerful communication strategies, leveraging different social media and other communication platforms, involve some key opinion leaders and some other resources to spread the word about the project. And at the same time, it's also very important to structure this communication in a way which will exclude the messages that might result in the expectations of the market that the token can be used preferably for the speculative purposes. What are the examples of such messages? It's everything related to the growth of the token price, the token listing on some exchanges, different models that involve burning the tokens and playing with the token supply. These all messages might lead to the cases where the tokens might be qualified as the securities, because the main reason why the market buys the tokens will be related to the speculative use case of the token. While the healthier approach for the project is to promote the utilities of the tokens that are not speculative, that are related to the technology, the underlying technology of the project, and not to the possibility to get some trading profits or some capital gains by holding the tokens. And there are some of the examples. There were a couple of recent examples like Pump Fund that was alleged because of their activities of promoting the growth of the token price. Even considering that it was mostly related to the meme tokens, still it resulted in these expectations of the market that the token is the financial instrument or as the instrument that helps to get some capital gains. And there were a couple of earlier cases like Mongo token and Bittrex case where these messages, which you might see on the screen, that were related to token price predictions, some token investment related terms, some other messages that resulted in the expectations of profits, were something that created this regulatory challenges for these projects. Therefore, when it comes to the risk mitigation activities, it's very important to analyze all the communications that are posted and that are made in on X, Farcaster, some other social media platforms, the messages that are translated through the intermediaries like key opinion leaders or some media. And it's important to exclude any promises, especially the ones that are related to the token price, and make sure that these posts are mostly for informational purposes, because that's where this that's what will help to make the communications in a compliance with the regulations about advertisement, the financial promotion regulations, and some other regulatory requirements related to digital assets. That was the mistake number 2. In terms of the mistake number 3, the mistake that is very relevant for the projects that are on the pre-TGE stage and that plan to do investor outreach, or which plan to do investor roadshow, or who plan to pitch their projects from the stage on some crypto conferences. These activities might be qualified as the direct investor solicitation, which is subject to regulatory requirements in some of the countries that have a very strict capital market regulations. You may see a couple of examples on the slide, and that's where the founding team or the business development managers should be very careful about their wording, about their activities, about their messages that they send to the potential investors, and how they try to sell the project to them as well, as there might be the risk that these activities might fall within the scope of investor solicitation regulations and might require additional compliance. For example, I assume that in the US you might have heard about the requirements to have the prospectus. There are some exceptions like Reg D and Reg S, which help to simplify these regulatory requirements. However, there are still the requirements to have private placement memorandums and token offering documentation. So if the project is ready to proceed with this fully compliant offering onto the highly regulated markets, it's important to ensure that all these works are done. Otherwise, it's very important to make sure that these communications that will be used for the investor outreach will not trigger the investor solicitation regulations. In terms of the use cases, there was this case of Mango token that we mentioned when speaking about the mistake number 2. And that was the case where even the non-US company, the entity that was registered in Panama, outreached the US-based investors, which triggered this US securities regulations, and as a result, which led to the regulatory challenges for the project. Therefore, today, it's very important for the token projects to use intermediaries to do their token offering and to do some communication activities as well. There are regulated token platforms like regulated launchpads and regulated token crowdfunding platforms, which already have some regulatory authorizations. They also have their investor database where most of the investors are accredited and pre-verified. So these intermediary platforms help to simplify the compliance requirements for the projects which plan to launch their tokens on these highly regulated markets. And apart from this, the other measure that might be implemented is related to the way of the marketing. For the projects, it's important to remember that once the project starts targeting the specific market by doing this direct solicitation and outreach, by using local languages, by using local media, that's the clear evidences for the local regulators that the project does the solicitation of the local users and investors from the specific market. Therefore, borderless way of communications where the messages are shared via the key opinion leaders, via the communities, and we are within the broader international network of builders, is usually the safer way to provide to make these communications and to share the messages. So that was risk number 3, and we are proceeding to the final fourth mistake that is related to the financial and sanction compliance. And as you may know, that's probably one of the riskiest type of the mistake, because it leads not just to the fines of the company, but also to the criminal liability of the founders and the directors of the project. Therefore, it's very important to make sure that all the measures for money laundering risk mitigations are implemented in the project. So one of the main risks that is related to this mistake is that the most of activities that are related to digital assets are subject to financial regulations and sanction compliance. And that's where the cases like Samurai Wallet and the Helix case were the examples on how the project ignored the geofencing matters. They ignored some on-chain AML checks and know your transactions verifications, and where therefore many illegal activities have been done via these platforms. It's also related to the tokens, because sometimes tokens can also be used for the illegal activities, such as terrorist financing or money laundering via the conversion of the funds from one types of assets into the tokens as the digital asset. Therefore, when it comes to the risk mitigation measures, one important part that is related to the project's compliance includes geofencing. That's where the project can implement the blocks for their website for specific locations and geographies, especially when it comes to the blacklisted countries that are where these lists are published by OFAC or FATF or some other international organizations that fight against money laundering. The other measure that is less popular today, however, which might become the market standard soon, is related to the VPN checks. This measure helps to make sure that even if some of the users from the sanction markets will manage to access the website using VPN, etc., the VPN checks will serve as this second preventive measure that will protect the project from such risks. And of course, when it comes to the decentralized projects and the token launch, where the simple MetaMask wallet or any other type of wallet can be connected to the project, it's hard to implement the proper KYC and user onboarding activities. However, today there are some solutions like Crystal or Elliptic or some other providers of the technologies that help to do the on-chain AML checks that will help to make sure that there will be no wallet addresses that are affiliated with the blacklisted wallets, with the darknet platforms, and with some other illegal activities. So that's where the KYT and online AML checks are very important to have as well. That was the final fourth mistake and the risk mitigation measures for it. Let's do the summary before we wrap up this presentation part of my presentation. So in terms of the key mistakes that we've discussed today and the key suggestions for risk mitigation, it's important to think about the tokenomics from the perspective of the balanced token allocations, to make sure that there is no substantial part of the tokens that is controlled or concentrated within one stakeholder of the Web3 project. It's important to make sure that the key messages about the token are focused on the software native use cases of the token rather than speculative use cases of the token. It's also important to make sure that the solicitation of the token buyers and investors are structured in a way which is in compliance with the local capital markets and the securities regulations. And the final part is related to financial and sanction compliance, where geofencing, on-chain AML checks, and VPN checks are very important measures to think about to make sure that there will be no illegal activities affiliated with the project. That's it from my part. Happy to proceed to the Q&A and hope this overview of the key legal mistakes on the pre-TGE stage was helpful for you.
Yeah, thank you, Nestor. That's been also quite insightful. And I'm pretty sure like there were some other mistakes we could include, but yeah, just due to time constraints, we wanted to keep it short and then try to answer some questions live. We really have a lot of questions to go through, and I think we'll start with the ones that have been asked live because they are directly related to the mistakes that you've mentioned. And then if we still have an opportunity, we'll answer a few of those that have been submitted beforehand. So heads up, we'll already approach the end of the event, but we can stay like 5-10 more minutes to answer the questions. If you can stay longer with us, we'll be happy, especially those who have asked the questions. So yeah, let's get into it. So I think the first question submitted live was about the US regulations. So as the US regulations and policy move towards a much safer environment for token launches, do you see US-based companies abandoning BVI Cayman legal wrapper framework in favor of launching from the US?
I think that we are at the beginning of this journey. And there will probably be a huge shift from the well-established corporate structuring approaches for tokens to the simpler and more straightforward structures. However, it's important to mention that in the US, there is still the regulatory vacuum when it comes to token issuance. And based on the agenda of the new administration that is related to crypto, the first regulations that will probably be released in the first half of the year will be related to the stable coins. So today it's a bit difficult to predict how fast the changes will be made in relation to tokens, especially when it comes to the utility tokens. Therefore, my prediction is that in the first 3 quarters of this year, this well-known Cayman, BVI, Panamanian, the UAE, Singapore, and other types of setups might still remain like the most workable solutions. And it's important to also mention that once the regulations are passed, there will still be the need to give them some time to get operationalized, which means that there might be some more detailed instructions to the officers and some other state authorities, which will help them to like better understand how to apply these new regulations to the tokens, etc. Therefore, this year is probably the year with the big change, but the first results of these changes we might see probably early next year.
Great. Yeah, so be optimistic, but at the same time cautious still. Yeah, let's wait for the regulations to pass. The next question was related to, I think, the first mistake about like decentralizing the project and how it helps with being compliant. So yeah, the question is like to provide more details. So what do you mean precisely that DAOs help with compliance?
That's a great question. And today we can speak about 2 general strategies of Web3 projects. Regulated strategies, which include the stages of obtaining licenses, implementing the full compliant onboarding process of the users that is required from one side, and which also provides the flexibility in terms of the custodial models of the projects, the asset-backed tokenomics, and some other important centralization parts of the project. So that's one strategy. Another strategy is non-regulated, where the project aims to reach the highest state of decentralization. That's, for example, the path of MakerDAO, of DYDX, or of some other of Uniswap, for example. Their goal is to improve the state of their decentralization within every update of their technology, which helps to make their smart contracts more permissionless, to make their transactions more autonomous, to decrease the number of activities that should be done manually or by third parties, to make sure that the system operates as the system is self-regulated. And that's the track that or the strategy that helps project to achieve this status of public benefit rather than the for-profit project or the commercial project that is run and controlled by the small group of beneficiaries. And if the project reaches out this qualification, that's what helps project to stay outside the scope of crypto regulations, some capital markets regulations, some securities regulations, etc. That at least that was the playbook that was used by many projects over past 3 or 4 years, probably since this DeFi boom started. However, I think it will depend on how the regulations will be changing this year and next year as well. Because if there will be more regulatory clarity for utility tokens and for the fully decentralized projects, maybe it will open up new opportunities or simplify these strategies for the projects as well.
Great. Yeah. And I think like 2 next questions from Andreas were like a follow-up question again on the first mistake. So does vesting have any impact on token classification? Because you mentioned that vesting like is risk mitigation element.
When it comes to the legal strategy for the project, we can speak about legal measures that help to mitigate the regulatory risks. But we also can speak about the technical measures that make some legal risks technically impossible, which also provides good protection for the founding team as well. Therefore, if you take a look, for example, on the Tron case study, if the Tron, let's imagine if the Tron had this vestings and lockups that were technically embedded into the smart contracts or the allocations, that might become a good proof for the core team of this project to make sure that they didn't have any technical possibility to leverage this substantial ownership of the tokens for market manipulation or for the token price manipulation, etc. Therefore, when it comes to the token vesting and the token lockups, this is the technical measure that has very important legal implications because it might serve as the very strong evidence for the potential regulatory investigations in the future that the founders didn't, and the core contributors and the insiders in general, they haven't had any technical possibility to somehow access these tokens and for doing some specific activities with these tokens that might harm the market. That's where that's how this risk mitigation measure works.
Great, thanks for like this level of detail. I think that makes more sense now. Next one, to confirm distribution of revenue to token holders can also not be talked about. So I think it's also in relation to qualifying token as a security potentially.
Based on some case law, the promises that the tokens will provide some passive income like dividends or some revenue sharing is one of the criteria that satisfies a Howey test and might lead to the token qualification as the security. However, it was quite straightforward in 2017 when there was this first DAO case with the dividend tokens. But then because the market evolved and because the Web3 projects became more complex, and today most of them consist of multiple layers, the infrastructure layer, like the blockchain network, the settlement layer, the actual protocol, the interface layer. Depending on the layer that is involved into this revenue sharing models, there might be different legal implications and legal qualification of the project as well. For example, Uniswap has quite an interesting way of sharing the incentives for the users and the contributors, where they have this revenue. As far as I remember, it's some sort of revenue sharing model that is structured within one of their technical layers. And apart from this, there is other project that allows third parties to run the front ends to their protocol and get some token rewards for it, which is also some sort of the revenue sharing as well. So today it really depends which technical layer of Web3 project is involved into this mechanics and how this token use case is promoted to the market. Because if it's the core use case and the main reason why token is promoted to the market, then it might increase the risks that the token is qualified as the security. At the same time, if the token has very strong protocol native use cases related to transaction fees or related to some access to extra functionality, and this revenue sharing use case is just one of the use case that has the goal to incentivize the users to use more actively the solution, the product, that's the case where the risks might be lower. But still, it depends very much on the tokenomics of the project or the token design, I would say.
Yep, no easy answers as usual. It depends. Yeah, I think, guys, yeah, we'll still go with two more questions just because there are like a lot and we can like physically cover all of them. And I'll just prioritize the questions that were more related to the to what we've discussed before to provide more value to those who stay here. But in case yeah, you want to discuss any of these other questions further, we'll provide resources to reach out and to dive deeper into specific topics after the event. So we'll send an email with the slides and the resources as well. So the next question was about, again, security, how to avoid token be qualified as a security. So what caveats should be taken into consideration when dealing with potential investors? I think we already covered a lot of that, but yeah, maybe you can provide some other considerations.
Absolutely. So just to summarize the way on how to analyze the token legal status, we usually suggest to use two categories of criteria. Category number one includes token use cases. And there are different types of use cases. The token can be used within the product, in the protocol. Token might provide some benefits, some incentives. Token might be backed by some types of assets. So depending on the use case of the token, there might be different token qualifications. Utility token, asset-backed token, equity token, security token, debt token, and some other types of tokens. And these types of the tokens can be grouped within the tokens that are non-regulated, like utility tokens, meme coins, some loyalty tokens, I would say, and the regulated tokens, like debt tokens, equity tokens, security tokens, dividend tokens, and the other tokens that might be treated as the financial instruments. But that's not the only category of criteria that is important to consider. The token might be the utility token based on the criteria number 1. However, if this token is promoted and is distributed in a way which results in the expectations of the market that this token will grow in price, will provide some capital gains, will result in some passive income, this utility token can be simply requalified into the security token. Therefore, the criteria number 2 that is important to consider is the criteria of token distribution and the communications related to tokens, and also the way on how the token buyers are solicited by the core team. So that's these 2 criteria that we suggest to consider, and these criteria were created based on the case law, preferably in the US, where there was this approach of regulation through enforcement, and where in most of the cases the regulators investigated these 2 key details of the tokens: the tokens use cases and the token distribution strategies that were used by the projects.
Awesome, thanks for such a nuanced explanation. I think the last question we'll tackle, Dan has left it twice. So we'll also cover this. It's related to receiving funds from the investors. Is it legal to receive funds via crypto transfer, or VCs choose bank transfers?
So usually it depends, and there are no regulatory restrictions for receiving the funds either in fiat or in crypto. When it comes to the big institutional venture capital firms, if it's not the Web3 native VC firm, it might prefer to use fiat. If it's the Web3 native firm, it might make investment in like USDC or some other type of stable coin. If it's some ecosystem that also makes investments, they might make this investment in the native token of the ecosystem. That's also the case. And when it comes to the project can accept different types of the investments in the different forms. There will just be one important suggestion to consider that is related to the financial compliance of this investment. Many well-established venture capital firms have quite a strict compliance policies and internal compliance departments, so there is very small risk that there might be some issues with it. But when it comes to the business angels who want to invest via SAFT, get the tokens fast, and then use these tokens for their own purposes, it's very important to verify such investors when it comes to their source of funds, when it comes to their wallet address, and some other details that are related to the financial and sanction compliance, just to make sure that there will be no risks that the project might be somehow involved into the illegal activities by cooperating with such type of investor.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Nestor, for explaining this one too. And I think we'll be wrapping this up. We're already 20 minutes past the planned end time of the event, but yeah, we wanted to provide as many possibilities as possible to dive deeper into some of the questions. Like legal is also a very broad topic, so we had more questions here about like decentralized versus centralized route, like airdropping tokens from DevCo, etc., etc. So if some of these questions are like pressing for your project, again, we'll follow up with detail on how to like contact Legal Nodes and Nestor directly to discuss some of these if you'd like to. And also, this is not the one-off event. We'll be doing these from time to time, maybe on a monthly basis. We'll see how it goes. So feel free to tune in into our following next discussions. Maybe we'll slightly like change the topic, focus on other use case, or maybe dive deeper into other aspects. So stay tuned. We'll be publishing more updates on next events. And thank you guys thank you everyone for tuning in. Thanks a lot to our speakers today, Vincent, Nestor. It's been very insightful for me. I hope it was the same for our attendees. We'll gather feedback then to know more. And guys, if you have any closing comments, feel free to share.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Mikita. Great to see such a come up and a number of attendees, and a very insightful presentation, Nestor. Looking forward to learn more next time.
Absolutely, and likewise, Vincent. Thanks a lot.
Yes.
Yeah,
thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys. Again, for everyone attending, we'll send the recording, we'll send the slides if you missed anything, so you'll have an opportunity to rewatch, double check, and yeah, let's stay in touch. Awesome. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.